We're live.
Good afternoon. This is the House Judiciary Committee. It's March the 4th, 2022. We have a voting session here today. We have three bills that were requested to be withdrawn by the sponsors. They are House Bill 110 from Delegate Shetty, House Bill 1113 from Delegate Davis, and House Bill 1131 from Delegate Bartlett. Can I have a motion, please, on the withdrawal, on the unfavorable, please?
Move unfavorable.
Motion for an unfavorable in a second. All those in favor of the unfavorable withdrawn, please raise your hands. Anybody opposed? Okay, there we are. All right. We have two bills. We'll start with House Bill 425 because we didn't touch on this at all other than going through the bill yesterday. My committee office has not received any amendments for House Bill 425 to be considered. Can I have a motion, please?
Move favorable.
So motion for a favorable. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. All right. We're on the bill. It's for a motion, a favorable motion. Delegate Arakan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say, I know this has been a couple years in the making, and I know the sponsors tried to tweak it over the years to bring forward the best possible bill. Obviously, there's still some concerns, major concerns that conservatives have for our constituencies, mostly that surround the penalty provision for people that may not get the message or the memo that we've changed the law. We have some pretty grave concerns that the penalty is pretty high. So I just wanted to make sure I stated that on the record for those out there who have similar concerns to ours. And hopefully, the very final version that passes at the end of the cycle is going to be something that, the entire body will be more comfortable with.
Are there further comments or questions? Delegate McComas, then Grammer. You're muted, Delegate McComas. You're still muted, Delegate McComas.
You've worn me out this week. Okay, question. This is for anybody that can answer it. What is the penalty for someone that has one of these ghost guns that is not serialized?
Delegate Lopez.
It is 3 years, $10,000 per firearm.
Okay.
Maximum.
Now, so what is the penalty? What would a comparable penalty be if they used it in a crime?
It'd be a mandatory 5. Depends on the kind of crime that they're looking at.
Well, let's say they shoot at somebody and maybe they shoot at them, so it's an assault, but maybe they didn't connect, so it's not a battery. What would that be?
That would be a first-degree assault. So that's 25 years. And then it would be a use of a handgun and crime of violence. So that would be a mandatory 5 with a maximum, I think, and Delegate Anderson can correct me, of 15. Yeah, and then it would be attempted murder, probably maybe attempted murder 1, attempted murder 2.
Well, just a thought. And I mean, I'm just wondering if maybe if the ghost gun is used in a crime, maybe that's where it ought to be the penalty, as opposed to if you just have a ghost gun, it's not used in a crime, but it's used, basically it's not serialized. But if it's used in a crime and it's not serialized, they should really get the book. Like even if it's a burglary or something, as opposed to if you're just a hobbyist, sitting in your basement, trying to put stuff together. You like to tinker. Any thoughts on that?
Delegate Lopez, do you have any comments? Or
Sure. No, Delegate McComas, I see where you're coming from with that. The problem is that this is really a supply chain issue of people setting up mom and pop gunsmithing shops in their garage and then selling them to prohibited people. So the possession is an important part of this. Well,
do we have any data on that? Data that says that it is a mom and pop business and that's what's going on? I mean, I don't recall, but I'm,
Well, we've received testimony in this committee from law enforcement officials across the state about them arresting folks. And probably the biggest one was, it's definitely within the last year in Baltimore City, there was, I think 3 people that were arrested for having one of these shops, and in their possession, they had 40 of these firearms that were about to be sold on the black market. Perhaps the chair knows how many eventually came from that investigation, how many were sold by those folks, but they were found with 40 of them. So the possession part, just because of the nature of the offense, is important to include in there.
but, okay, but we're assuming they were going to be used in a crime or sold to someone that would commit a crime. But do we know that for a fact that they'd done that before? I mean, maybe they just, I'm just saying, maybe they just like make stuff with computers. I don't know.
Well, it's not really people making these from computers. They're purchasing the parts online and then reselling them.
And we've definitely linked that up. Cause
Yes,
and effect.
yes. People are
Okay.
buying these pieces, knowing that it's fully legal, buying the equipment, making them in their homes, and then selling them to people who would otherwise be prohibited at a premium cost, because they know that prohibited people have no other means of buying these types of firearms. So what would normally be, like a used AR-15 that you could buy for, $600 legally, they can sell that for a much higher cost.
Okay, all right. Thank you,
Delegate,
Mr. Chair.
thank you. Delegate Grammer, then Delegate Cox and Delegate Juanita Fisher. Delegate Grammer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few comments for the record. I think there's been a push to strike criminal penalties over the past few years, and I think that striking criminal penalties that have never been prosecuted in the same time we're criminalizing gun ownership, I think we're going in the wrong direction. Considering that we've seen like enforcement snafus that have led to the death and detriment of just average gun owners, the Duncan Lemp situation, the latest Mr. Locke, who died in the execution of a no-knock warrant for just having a gun. I think putting another criminal penalty on gun ownership, which could lead to the execution of a warrant on an average person just for owning a gun, is terrible. I think the comments about the supply chain holes are not accurate. If you're a prohibited person, it's already a violation of the law. So adding another criminal penalty for the possession, putting aside the parts of this bill that criminalize the sale, I think having a criminal penalty just for owning one of these guns is terrible. I think we have giant holes in our public safety, specifically for the Baltimore region, that have not gone addressed. And it's the work of this committee to consider things like that. When you have papers that are commenting that your forensic evidence, 50% of it's not being processed, I think that's something we should drill down on, not criminalizing average people for owning guns. And that's why I'll be voting no today.
Delegate Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quickly, what is the penalty currently, Delegate Lopez, for someone who sells a firearm illegally? In other words, someone who's operating a shop without an FFL?
Are you talking about someone who's selling to prohibited people? Because that's a felony and $100,000 fine.
Well, honestly, it would be both, right? I mean, there would be at least two crimes. One would be to the prohibited person, but just operating a shop, illegally selling firearms. Your example for why you wanted the bill was you had mom and pop shops that were selling firearms to prohibited persons, but I would imagine they'd also sell them to anybody who would pay. So it's $100,000 fine. How many years in jail for selling to a prohibited person?
I think it's 10 years.
So we got 10 years in
Minimum.
jail,
Mhm.
10 years in jail and
No, the chairman's making a
$100,000
face.
fine.
I know it's a felony and $100,000.
Okay,
fine.
and I'm imagining that if you're operating a shop and you're selling without an FFL, that's a crime as well. And does anybody know do you happen
Well,
to have
you're
that?
allowed just as a citizen to sell a certain number of firearms a year. I think that's limited to, I think you can sell 10 of your own personal firearms, but anything outside of that, you do have to be licensed by the federal government by receiving at least an FFL level 1.
And that would also be a state crime, I would imagine, if you're selling 11, 15, 20 guns. If you're manufacturing them, obviously you can't even sell those 10 if you're manufacturing them. That's already a crime.
Yeah, there's a different type of license if you're a gun manufacturer.
Right. So these guns that you're trying to ban are actually this law does not target the illegal activity. It actually targets the law-abiding Marylander who is crafting his own guns for his own purposes, because there's already a 10-year jail term for somebody who's a prohibited person for selling to that person. There's already a crime of being a dealer. So this is a very narrow focused bill on one particular category of several 100,000 Marylanders. And those are law-abiding Marylanders who are making their own guns.
Well, number one, the committee didn't receive any testimony that can quantify how many hobbyists there are in the state. That was a question that was posed to the Attorney General, and he even could estimate it. In the past, I guess 5 years, there's been 12,000 of these that have been sold that we can track. So to say it's targeting hundreds of thousands of people is pretty outrageous. I think there is a need for this. I mean, we received testimony in this committee from law enforcement saying that this loophole is endangering them. And
but they didn't address my question. That no one's discussed this. I mean, you can't charge somebody under this bill that you wanted to pass for selling a gun. That's not the chargeable offense. This is strictly a charge for making one, which is a lawful activity.
The bill, if you look at the first line, it's the ban on the sell, transfer, and possession.
So the possession part is what is going to ensnare hundreds of thousands of Marylanders who make their own guns, at least thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. I know there's a lot of people that make their own guns, as a hobby, and you're not exempting those individuals. I mean, there's already
we've considered the amount of people who are potentially hobbyists, although you yourself cannot quantify them, however many there are, there is a legal pathway for them. They can sell those firearms in another state. There's no prohibition on that. You can have it serialized by an FFL in our state. But they don't want that. They don't want the government tracking their firearm, their personal property like that. And they're law-abiding people, right? I mean, I don't want a lot of things, but this is a legal pathway for them to be able to still maintain possession of their firearms. And if your priority is maintaining your firearm, then we've created a pathway for you to do that. Well, I think the concern that I have, and I'll leave it at this, but the concern I have is that these are law-abiding Marylanders who will become criminals unless they register their property with the government, which is exactly and precisely a concern that they have. And when you look at what's going on in Ukraine, I think we see that there's the whole world is cheering on the citizenry taking up arms to defend themselves against a atrociously horrific regime coming in to attack them. So this simply allows for bigger government to track and also entrap law-abiding people, and that's why I'll be voting no. Thank you. Well, Delegate, I would caution you against comparing the United States government with the regime in Russia, but I appreciate your concern. I want to be very clear. I'm not comparing the United States government with the regime in Russia. I was making it, no, I'm not. And I'll make it very clear and I'll make it very precise. The reason that Americans, since our founding and our liberties, have maintained no government registration of firearms is because it is a natural right that we have for self-defense. It's recognized by the Supreme Court. And the reason for that is to prevent ever the United States from becoming or being invaded by an enemy such as a tyrannical regime.
So it's in fact the exact opposite of what you're saying. I want to protect the United States from such tyrannical regimes. So thank you.
Let's go to Delegate Juanita Fisher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Lopez, for all the work and years and just everything you've done on this bill. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about and put out in the form. I think it was sometime last year, and I was working on a case in Calvert County, and I called you because their deputy state's attorney reached out to me, even though we were dealing with a different case, with their concerns and passion about ghost guns in Calvert, as I was doing my regular job there. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about that discussion and a little bit more about what state's attorneys are seeing and what they're going through when it comes to ghost guns and the increase. And thank you for taking my call. I think it was midsummer and making that connection for me.
Thank you, Delegate Fisher. I think, one of the reasons why I've been consistently working on this bill is I haven't really had a chance. People keep contacting me about it, thinking associating me with this issue. And so you're right, there was a state's attorney who reached out to you, and then I spoke to him. And one thing that I've noticed from working on this bill is that it's the jurisdictions that have greater population density, like Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Baltimore City, that get a lot of press coverage about this issue, but it is an issue in the more rural areas in Southern Maryland. There was just a student at a high school in Charles County, I think it was last week or maybe the week before, who was caught with one of these on school grounds. It's unclear whether he assembled the firearm himself or whether he bought it from someone. But I mean, this is an issue that's impacting, counties big and small across the state. And I would refer the committee to the testimony that we received from the state's attorneys about this bill that was submitted for the hearing.
Delegate Conaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we have to ask permission to use the delegate's name?
I guess I would appreciate it, but
Okay,
go ahead.
Making this-
Who would you like to speak to?
No. I'm speaking to the committee in general.
Okay,
And Delegate Cox was making his argument, and I was following his argument. And then I received communication that asked me how many such firearms do I have, or do certain people in my family have? And suddenly I felt very, very, very uncomfortable, which allows me to see what I think Delegate Cox is talking about. I mean, before I was asked the question, I didn't feel uncomfortable. But once I was asked that question, I felt uncomfortable, and it was, it's like barging into a person's personal business. So I'm saying some people might not want to have their firearms registered if they're doing illegal activity, like putting it together piece by piece. I was just wanted to add that because I did feel uncomfortable.
thank you very much. Are there further questions or comments? There's a motion for a favorable that has been seconded. Seeing no further questions or comments, we'll go for a roll call. The Vice Chair,
Yes.
Delegate Shoemaker,
No.
Delegate Anderson,
Yes.
Delegate Arakan,
No.
Delegate Bartlett,
Yes.
Delegate Carden,
Yes.
Delegate Conaway,
Yeah,
Delegate Cox,
No,
Delegate Crutchfield,
Yes.
Delegate Davis,
Yes.
Delegate Juanita Fisher,
Yes.
Delegate Grammer,
No.
Delegate Howell,
Yes.
Delegate Jones,
Yes.
Delegate Lopez,
Yes.
Delegate McComas,
No.
Delegate Munoz,
Hold on 1 second. Hold on.
Delegate Munoz,
No.
Delegate Shetty,
Yes.
Delegate Cham. You muted yourself. Okay. Delegate Tolles,
Yes.
Delegate Williams,
Yes.
14. All right, the bill is passed the committee and will go to the floor. We have one other bill. It is also Delegate Lopez's bill, House Bill 322. I don't believe we received any amendments on this bill.
Move favorable.
The motion
Mr. Chair.
Motion for a favorable. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Delegate Carden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, I did, I tried to get some of the folks who are interested in amendment to get something drafted. They have drafted, they haven't gotten approval for it. So I guess they're going to try to work on it over in the Senate. So,
Okay. All right. Are there further questions or comments regarding House Bill 322? All right, seeing none, the Vice Chair,
yes.
Shoemaker,
Yes.
Anderson,
I'm with Shoemaker. Yes.
Erican,
No.
Bartlett,
Yes.
Carden,
Yes.
Conaway,
Yes.
Cox,
No.
Crutchfield,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Juanita Fisher,
Yes.
Grammer,
No.
Howell,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Lopez,
Yes.
McComas,
No.
Munoz,
Yes.
Shetty,
Yes.
Cham,
No.
Tolles,
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
16. Okay. That is what we have for today. The Family Law Committee Subcommittee will be meeting at 3 o'clock on Monday. We have floor session. We have floor session on the floor of the House of Delegates session at 6 p.m. on Monday. So we have a Monday session again. On Tuesday, we'll be back for bill hearings in the committee. I think that there are a significant number of bills in the next week. We have not had a late night yet. Let's see if that holds up next week. Something to look forward to. Expect voting sessions after bill hearings on both Wednesday and Thursday, possibly Friday, but definitely Wednesday and Thursday. All right, with that, that concludes the business for the week and concludes the voting session. We thank you all very much, and we will see you again shortly. Thank you again.